This video is sponsored by Squarespace.
What's up guys, 28-200 Tamron, just got it in right now. We're at this really awesome house, got a Tesla Model Y, and I have some fun shooting this, so check it out. So anytime I see a lens like this, and the first thing I'm gonna check is where the aperture changes, and I'm really impressed with this one. I mean, I am zooming all the way past 75 millimeters. It is still just an f4 lens, and all the way at 100 millimeters, only a third of a stop different at f4.5. So from an aperture perspective, this thing is absolutely killer. So the image quality seems to be pretty amazing so far, but image quality seems to be amazing so far, but every so often I'm having some issues on focusing. Like, it just won't want to focus, especially if it's in some of the darker areas of the image. So curious if it's going to work at all in low light because of that, but image quality so far seems incredibly sharp no matter what focal length I'm shooting at. So it's really awesome to have just one lens the entire time out here. It's been great to do that. So if you don't mind sacrificing some of that aperture, especially on the longer end, man, it's really convenient to be rocking this because it's so small. I mean, the 28-75 is pretty much the same size as this, and it's getting you a lot of lens for that. All right, everything's looking good here, so we'll take this back to the studio and see what we got.
All right, we're back in the studio with the 28-200, but first, you guys have heard me talk about websites, but a website doesn't have to be like this professional business page if you don't want it to. It could also be a blog, it could also be a gallery. So go ahead and check out squarespace.com because they have templates for all that kind of stuff, and it's completely free to get started. You guys know they have a bunch of awesome templates, and it's so crazy easy to get your site set up in a matter of minutes. So I want to add a picture for my camera guides right on the front page. I could just click this little image search, type in camera, and bam, I've got all of these amazing images I can use as a thumbnail. Maybe you've got something like a food blog, no problem. Squarespace has you covered here. And just check this out, I can still go in here, change my photo settings, control my crops, custom filters, just anything that you can think of. I can now add my products to sell for an entire storefront. I can create some awesome custom galleries, which I can even have password protected for my clients, which is awesome. And then even for my latest Instagram image, they can be imported to the gallery here or post automatically to the website homepage. So it is completely free to get started. So go ahead and check that out. When you guys build something awesome, use coupon code LearningCameras and you can go live with that site today. Now let's talk about this lens a little bit, but also, man, that Tesla is pretty freaking awesome. It is like so tech savvy, acceleration is amazing. I am still like 50-50 on whether or not I like that modern interior type of look, but I mean, overall, it's pretty freaking awesome. Now, I had one lens on the entire day and we hit up like 6 locations in a couple hours. And if you know me at all, that is incredibly rare for me to have one lens on me. And that's kind of the main point to this, is being able to get one lens that kind of covers so many different kinds of focal lengths that you really don't need anything else for that one. But there's so much else that Tamron is kind of getting right here. So it's kind of a similar build to their other lenses and even the 70-180, which I just did a review on. And that's pretty much a good thing. I mean, it's mostly plastic, but it's built very well. There is some moisture resistance on that. Also, I did notice that the autofocus on this was pretty much silent, like you cannot hear it, which is great to see. Also, something else that Tamron does really well is macro ability. So this isn't quite a macro lens or anything like that, but it does get 0.32 times magnification, which basically blows away anything that you could get from like a Sony lens. Now, the other big appeal to this is that it has an f2.8 starting aperture. While most lenses start at about 3.5 for like kit zoom lenses like this one. And that's a pretty big difference. I mean, you're talking 2/3 of a stop more light. And then one of the things that I noticed is that it can actually go over 100 millimeters and still be at f4.5. So that's really good. And at 200 millimeters, you're at f5.6, which again, most lenses are about 1/3 of a stop darker on that. So great overall aperture on that one. One of the main reasons that I typically stay away from like kit lenses like this and go to the more expensive constant apertures is to have that. You get more light in the camera. It means you can use better shutter speeds or faster shutter speeds or lower ISOs, and that makes a pretty big difference. Now, Tamron did choose to go with a 28-200. I kind of wish that they had gone a little bit wider. I know they often do that because it will lower the weight or the price or something like that. However, 200 millimeters is plenty, especially because this lens is so sharp that you can crop in as much as you want and the images still look great. But on the wider end, there's no way to go wider. And that meant like for shooting interiors of the car, I had to be kind of outside the car. 28 is just not that wide. Now they do have their 17-28 millimeter lens. So maybe they want you to go ahead and buy this. Who knows? However, one of the big appeals to this lens is just having one lens and not needing anything else. So I did find that a little bit lacking. Sony has like a 24-240 millimeter lens, and that range kind of encompasses a little bit more of what you would typically need. Another reason I tend to kind of shy away from these ultra zoom lenses that kind of cover everything is that it is so difficult to make them sharp and look good at every focal length that usually they don't compared to lenses like this. But this looks amazing. I mean, at 28 millimeters, even wide open at 2.8, this lens is sharp. You will not have a problem with it at all. Even in the corners, it look good. At f4, you will notice vignetting improves because the vignetting is a little severe. However, when it comes to sharpness, I mean, this thing looks good all the way around. As you start to get into 70 millimeters, distortion started to pick up quite a bit. However, the images also looked a little bit less sharp for me, but still very good. I had no issues with it whatsoever. As you go and start zooming into 200, distortion starts to go away and the image quality even improves a little bit more. So at 200 millimeters, this thing is tack sharp. Now you're at 5.6 at this point, so just kind of keep that in mind. But even at the wide open 5.6 at 200 millimeters, this looks amazing. Now keep in mind you don't have image stabilization on this lens. Now if you're using a newer camera like I was, the A7 III, and these test images were all on the R3, both of those have in-body image stabilization, which I find is good enough for a lens under 200 millimeters. So if you have a camera like that, I think you'll be fine without the optical image stabilization. But if you don't, 200 millimeters is a long distance to try to handhold that lens, so you might be more pressured to go with like the Sony 24-240 or a different type of lens that does have image stabilization built into the lens. Now we are using a 7-blade round aperture, which is about par for the course for this. Most of your higher end lenses will be a 9-blade aperture, but overall I would say the image quality in this lens looked great. Your out of focus areas or your bokeh is a little bit on the busy side, but still very round and everything like that. So I think for a lens like this, it is absolutely pulling its weight. The problem is there is so much competition of what kind of lenses you could be buying. So, you could be ending up with the kit lens, which is a 28-70 millimeter f3.5-5.6. Now this lens is actually very sharp and built pretty well for a kit lens for Sony. However, do keep in mind that this is going to give you way more reach. And then at 70 millimeters, you're at 5.6 on this lens. At 70 millimeters, you're at f4 on the Tamron 28-200. And that is a huge difference. One stop is incredible. So you will also have that wider aperture, which it means shooting at lower ISOs or faster shutter speeds. And that's a big difference. Now, Sony does have a 24-240 millimeter lens. That will get you optical image stabilization. It also gets you that wider 24 millimeters versus a 28, which could be a big difference. However, it's coming at a huge price tag increase. You are also having to deal with a much larger weight on that lens, and then the aperture is not quite as wide, so that could be a deterrent for you there. Now for me, if you want a lens that's kind of lower priced, especially if you want it a little bit lighter weight, this is a category that Tamron just really has a lock on. They're doing so much in this kind of way, and especially if you have image stabilization built into the body of your camera, I think this thing is going to be a no-brainer if you want kind of that one lens that covers a lot of different focal lengths. If you don't have image stabilization, that's where you might want to look at their kit lenses or their 24 to 240, or look at some of their higher end f4 constant zoom lenses. They're going to cost you more than this, but they're very good and they offer you all of those abilities right there. I still love like a 70 to 180, this f2.8, because yes, you get that wider aperture at that 28 to 70 range, f2.8 to like f4 in that range. But as you start getting over 70 millimeters, f4 to 5.6, this starts offering a lot of advantages in those low light circumstances. So hit me up if you guys have any questions below. I'll actually be shooting with a new car, like over 100 grand for this thing, next week. So say hi on Instagram, check it out, and I'll see you guys soon.